Welcome, everybody, back to the Oklahoma Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and as always, I got my co host, Matt, here with me. We are going to continue right along with our position review series. This week, we are going to be talking about the defensive tackles for the New York Jets, a very sneaky need for this team as it currently stands right now heading into 2023. There are only two players on the roster at defensive tackle that are under contract for the 2023 season. Luckily, one of them is Quinnen Williams, so that is a nice, sweat wipe off the forehead there. But besides him, it's just Tanzel Smart, who is mainly a reserve player, practice squad guy, called up a little bit during the season, but hasn't seen too much regular season action. Matt, let's get right into this here. Looking at the outside free agents for this team, they got a lot of guys that are about to go. They have three in particular set to be undrafted free agents. Sheldon Rankins, who was a starter for them last year, and then two of their key reserves in Nathan Shepard and Solomon Thomas. I think first and foremost, before we get looking to the outside and free agency and the draft and what can we do to kind of round out this position, we were talking off air, and I think the linchpin of how this goes is going to be what happens with Sheldon Rankins internally. If he were to be brought back, I think that's a very smart move for them to make. I think it's something the Jets should look into doing. Keep guys that know the system that can play together and play well. That said, Rankins might price himself out of what the Jets can afford or be willing to afford. So let's go ahead and talk about that, Matt. I want you to lead here. Just take us through the scenarios of what could happen and what couldn't, whether Rankins is going to make sense financially or not.
Yeah, so in hearing what Sala had to say, I believe it was today or yesterday, it sounds like they really want to keep the gang together, keep the guys that we had that led that led our defense on such a rampage last year, and really build off of that. So bringing back the guys that we had makes a lot of sense. But then, as you said, rankings might price himself out. I've heard rumors that he is looking for the something in the $8 to $10 million range, which I think is an incredibly high price for what he offers. When he was brought in, I saw him more as a pass rush specialist, uh, who was then forced into a bigger role on rundowns. And not to say he didn't, step up to the plate and do his job last year, because I think he did an admirable job last year, and exceeded my expectations as far as being able to fill into that role. Um, but I just don't see that as a stable solution for that, especially on those rundowns. I think maybe last year was more of a flash in the pan rather than something that we should expect. And paying him that much money for a flash in the pan just doesn't seem like smart money. So I would love him back, but most definitely not at that price. And I'm not sure if anybody else is going to be willing to pay him that price either. So he might price himself out of a lot of deals out there. So you never know. We just got to let that one play out. I can kind of see him kind of going into late free agency with a lot of people not biting on his numbers. And maybe that's the moment JD gives him a call and goes, "Hey, so we still love you here and we love you back. How does this number sound?" And hopefully that's a number that's significantly lower than the ones he's asking for right now. And as for the depth, we have Canadian Thanos. We have Solomon Thomas, who I guess they played a nice depth role. Like they were able to come off the bench uh, and do their thing, but at the same time, none of them really like stepped up to be like, wow, these guys are really making a name for themselves in this rotation. They belong to stay in this rotation. None of them, I feel, have done that. So if we bring them back, it's more because they're familiar with the system, and because we know that they're already decent depth pieces. But that's not going to stop me from looking elsewhere to try and improve. And there are some names in free agency that we can look to outside of what we had last year. But yes, if all else fails, I don't think the market for Solomon Thomas and Shep are going to be that crazy. I don't think anybody's going to be beating down the doors to sign these guys. So I think that we can always turn to them if we're looking for depth pieces. on the cheap, and that's where I see them. Um, but really, we need a guy next to Quinnen. We need a solid starter that can step in and be that stalwart right next to him. When Quinnen went down last year, you saw that how teams just ignored the interior of our defensive line. They just double teamed our edges, and and everybody else in the middle was singled up and eliminated in that Lions game. We can't have that. It's our hope and our dream that Quinton makes it all 17 games next year. But you know what? Things happen. People get banged up. We need as much talent on that interior defensive line as we have on the exterior, on the edge. We have a number of guys on the edge that can fill right in if somebody goes down. On the inside, we have nothing, and especially now with nobody under contract other than Smart. So it is imperative that we get at least one more solid guy, preferably a vet, that can be right alongside Q on early downs, but also just fill in for Q if needed, and then kind of just fill in the ranks with cheap depth guys or even in the draft, and kind of grow that way.
Yeah, I agree. I completely and totally agree. The point that you made right there at the end for me is the real thing to highlight. They really don't have anything. They have Quinnen Williams, which is not nothing. Let's be very clear about that. Quinnen Williams is a superstar and one of the best players at his position in the league. But after him, they literally have a practice squad player and nothing else. That to me, Matt, honestly makes me feel like one of the two of Shepard or Solomon Thomas is going to be brought back. I just don't see. I would be very surprised if they would be willing to cast off that many people in that room and have to bring in so many new bodies at once to fill out the rotation that, as we know, is so important to this defensive line and specifically the head coach in Robert Saleh, where he fully believes in rotating that front and keeping guys fresh and sending waves after waves of pass rushers and defensive linemen at offenses throughout the course of a game. You can't do that if you have two defensive tackles on your roster and one of them's a practice squad guy. So I really think that one of the two of them is going to be brought back. I don't know who. I'm not going to put any bets for which one it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be any serious money. I think it would be similar to the 1 year deal that Solomon Thomas had already signed, or year to year sort of contracts like that. But I think one of them is going to be back. Next, I want to talk about Rankins because we were talking about him pricing himself out and getting too expensive. And I want to put all of that into context for everybody when looking at Rankins and what he's asking for. Where if he's asking for a salary in the $8 to $10 million a year range, that puts him in the top 15 of defensive tackles in the league in terms of annual salary, period. That you think every team is at least two, usually, if not more, starters at defensive tackle. That's well over 60 starting defensive tackles in the NFL per season. And Sheldon Rankins wants to be paid like a top 15 one. I think that's going to be, like you said, too rich for not only the Jets, but most other teams as well. Where even looking at something a little cheaper, maybe in the $7 million range, $7 million range, he's around the 20th highest paid defensive tackle. So it's not that far down in terms of position in the league and pricing and everything else to be a few $1 million off. But if he's really looking to get into that, $10 million range, that's going to put him towards the top. For reference, if you're looking at the absolute highest paid players at their position, Aaron Donald leads the pack at $31 million a year. His contract is absurd and significantly more expensive than anybody else in the league. He signed as the highest paid defensive player in league history at the time of his contract. He doesn't count. Aaron Donald's a first ballot Hall of Famer and one of the best players in NFL history. His situation is irrelevant. Number two is DeForest Buckner at $21 million. So literally $10 million less than Aaron Donald is number two at DeForest Buckner. Chris Jones is three at $20 million. Deron Payne, who just signed his franchise tag, is now fourth. He'll be playing on that $18.9 million franchise tag, fourth most in the league. Jonathan Allen at five at $18 million. So the gap in terms of the top of the league and where Rankins is looking to be placed, I think the money is just going to be too much. And I really think that he's going to be closer to probably around the $6 to $7 million a year range. And this is where I want to transition into free agency with the first guy that I want to talk about outside of this team. If Rankins prices himself out significantly and gets to the point where he's going, I want at least $9 million a year, and that's going to be how it is. And if I don't get it from here, then I'll go wait for somebody else and see what ends up happening. Then so be it. You let the guy walk. And the very first phone call I make is going to be to Greg Gaines from the LA Rams, the defensive tackle from LA. This guy's one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL and has been for a couple of years now. Doesn't put out amazing stats, has only got 10 and a half career sacks over the last 4 seasons, but he had 4.5 in 2021 and another 4 sacks in 2022. He's played in every game of this, or he's only missed 2 games the last 3 years. So good longevity on the inside as well. Relatively young. He's only 26, going to be probably 27 when the league starts, so still has some upside there. And a guy that, for someone who predominantly plays nose tackle for the Rams, his ability to penetrate, his ability to rush the passer, his ability to get under guys' pads and push them back and get off blocks and be kind of slippery is really, really underrated. And he's a dang good run defender, too, where the guy is no slouch against the run, perfectly stout, no trouble getting off blocks in that regard, stacking and shedding and getting into the backfield. I really feel like this is a guy where the Jets could sign him for $7 to $8 million a year, are comparable to maybe what Rankins is asking for, and possibly even a little less. And they could be getting a guy that, in this system, with the players that we have around him, where he's not in a scheme like he would be in LA, where he's having to two gap a little more and not be asked to be the splash player. I think you get this guy into our scheme and take the seatbelt off him and let him go. And you're talking about getting maybe a top 10 defensive tackle for top 20 defensive tackle money. I absolutely love that fit. I love that idea. I think that's a guy that can continue to grow with Quinnen and form a absolutely just devastating duo on the inside that are going to be reliable, that are going to be, balls to the wall as much as you could hope for. That's my top target. I don't necessarily think, Matt, we'll get into this more as the show goes on, I don't know if that's necessarily the smartest plan. I think the smartest plan is going to be try and bring Rankins back for a reasonable price and then look to fill out your depth with either guys in low level free agency or some mid to late round draft picks. And that's kind of how you sort things from there for this year. But if Rankins gets too expensive and they have the money to spend that they would have spent on him anyway, I would be breaking down Greg Gaines's door to see what it would take to get him to New York. I think it would be perfect.
Is he just coming off of his rookie contract, or is this the
Yep.
second? Yeah, so he's 27 years old. Like you said, he's still young. Um, I would definitely look to him as that solid. That kind of move has JD written all over it. I feel like
Yes, it
JD
does.
loves to get these guys kind of on the cheap that have had solid careers, like Rankins. Like when we got Rankins, I was excited about that.
And JFM from
and
the Rams
JFM.
before.
Well, JFM didn't really have the same career as Rankins. I feel like JFM was more a projection pickup when we got
Yeah,
him.
but he had some splashes in LA. He had a handful of plays where he would get in and make plays. He had some big plays in their Super Bowl. I remember when they played the Patriots. There was something there, but like exactly what you're talking about, we're really on the same page, where it's a guy that has shown flashes of being better that isn't being fully utilized, that could be fully utilized for us.
Very true. And yeah, if we can get him at around the same price that we had Rankins last year and the year before, around the 5 million mark, I think that would be a tremendous boost. And then if you look past Gaines, there's a lot of guys that might be kind of pricing themselves out for us, along with Rankins, with like Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, whose contract's in a void year. Like these guys are maybe good scheme fits for us, but at the same time, they're going to be highly sought after. Even at 33, yes. Cox is still a monster and will warrant a decent sized paycheck. And I just don't see us really shooting for the stars here, especially with what limitations we might have, depending on what happens with quarterback and everything else. So I feel like interior defensive line is kind of the position where we want to find a guy like Gaines, and kind of build through that, and then grab some depth behind them. And then on passing downs, we can kind of rely more on our hybrid guys like Franklin Myers and Clemens. We might see them more on the inside next year. Although maybe more Franklin Myers than Clemens. I kind of like Clemens on the outside. Even though he's kind of a mismatch, he's just so quick for interior linemen to handle. I kind of like seeing how he blossoms as an edge rusher. But Franklin Myers for sure, I feel like would be a great third down complement. And yeah, a guy like Gaines kind of allows you to use those guys more in that role, and not force things like we did with Rankins. He fits that to a T.